Today, we're going to dive into gerrymandering since it is the current topic of rage baiting across the internet. Now, as a geographer, I have studied and taught about gerrymandering from my bachelor's degree through my PhD studies and taught to both undergrads and masters. So, welcome to a pseudo masterclass on gerrymandering. First, let's start by looking at this at a national scale. So nationally, Democrats have both the lean and registration advantage, but not by much. When you look at just party affiliation, Democrats have the largest share with 33%, and Republicans have a slightly smaller share at 32%. The rest are either not affiliated with a party or they're affiliated with a third party, like the Green Party, Libertarian Party, Workers' Family Party, something like that. And those parties are not the same in every state either, so the breakdown becomes a little more iffy. And voters are asked whether they lean more Democrat or lean more Republican. Democrats come out again as having a slight majority, with 49% saying that they lean Democrat and 48% saying they lean Republican. And this is true in a lot of states that are very competitive, but when you start to look at the congressional districts and how the state's individual statistics break down compared to the nation, you start to see something what we would call a little bit of gerrymandering. The topic that everyone is talking about is Texas's decision to, between censuses, redistrict their state to basically lock out Democrats. And this is, of course, a power struggle to inflict total authoritarianism and party rule across the country coming next year's elections. So there have been threats from other states to potentially do this as well, one of which is California. The difference between Texas and California's districts as they stand right now, one of which is that Texas is an F. They have an F grade because they're already gerrymandered to favor the Republican Party, whereas California is actually a fairly drawn state. Of course, these statistics vary across state to state, and if you're wondering, well, don't Democrats do that too? Not really. So one of the worst gerrymandered states in the country is Maryland, the state that I live in. So we have 7 Democratic representatives in the U.S. House, and we have 1 Republican. However, 24% of our state is Republican, whereas 53% is Democrat. So it should be a little more balanced. They should have 1 more representative. So threats to gerrymander Maryland out of its 1 Republican seat, when it's already considered a very gerrymandered state, it's a little off-putting. But let's go ahead and look at some of the Republican states, all right? Because these are really the worst states as far as gerrymandering goes. And one of the worst is Florida. Florida is so heavily gerrymandered, it's offensive, it's overt. So they are about 40% Republican, 30% Democrat, and 28% other or unaffiliated. Their reps, however, are 72% Republican and 28% Democrat in one of the heaviest skews that we will see from all the states that we're reviewing today. And that 8 Democratic representative seats really should come with an asterisk because Jared Moskowitz is, in voting record, much more of a Republican than he is a Democrat. So it's really tilted even worse. Then you have Louisiana, a state that I also lived in. And until about 2010, the state of Louisiana had only been represented, at least in the Senate, by Democratic representatives. And so this has a state with a long history of being a purple state. And it might surprise you to know this, but there are more registered Democrats in the state of Louisiana than there are Republicans. And yet, of their 6 seats, only 1 is a Democrat. Just 1. This is also considered a state that is racially gerrymandered, which means that it is cut up in such a way so that the Black population, which is almost a third of the population, only gets 1 seat. And when they proportionally should have 2. That's actually would be perfect proportionally. So it is both a partisan gerrymandered state and a racially gerrymandered state. And it's one of the worst that you'll see on the list. North Carolina, similarly, is a lot like Florida, where it's split about a third between Republicans and Democrats, and the rest are either not affiliated with a party or are with a third party. And yet, when you look at their representatives, of which they have 15, 2/3 are Republicans. They're already gerrymandered. And North Carolina is a state that is currently represented at its highest executive level by Democrats. That is how gerrymandered the state is. New York, which everyone loves to go to New York, like, I bet New York gerrymanders. No, they don't. They actually have an A grade on gerrymandering because their representatives are proportional to the party registration and racial breakdown of the state. So half the state is registered Democrats, 22%, so not even a quarter, are registered Republicans, and the rest are something else. Within their reps, Republicans are actually, despite being a minority party, overrepresented in Congress. They're 22% of the state, they're 26% of representatives. So New York is a lesson in fairness, partly because they have those independent redistricting boards. If you look at the breakdown of which states get an F versus a D versus a C, you'll notice that most of the Democrat-controlled states have an A or a B. And that's because they've implemented independent redistricting boards, which are made up of community members, experts like myself, geographers, political scientists who work on these things on a nonpartisan way to ensure that representation is equal across the state, or as close to it as you can get when dividing up communities, versus Republican states, which represent the overwhelming majority of failing or D states. Because every time they're in control of the state, they take every opportunity to gerrymander the state. So all the Republican states that are threatening to do this are already gerrymandered. Some Democrat ones, like Maryland, are already pretty gerrymandered as well. But Republicans don't realize that we win the long game as Democrats if we gerrymander our states, because we were already being fair. And so if we erase Republicans after having been so fair to them, because we will have total party control in each one of these states. And it's not a game we should be playing. If you want to see why I think that this game is dangerous for the United States, for our democracy, visit mesoscalenews.com, and you'll see my latest pieces on the authoritarian grab for power in the United States.